Hi, this is Mac from Mac's List. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about my new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. I've been helping job seekers find meaningful, well-paying work since 2001, and now I put all my best advice into one easy-to-use guide. My book shows you how to make your resume stand out in a stack of applications, where you can find the hidden jobs that never get posted, and what you need to do to ace your next job interview. Get the first chapter now for free. Visit maxlist.org/anywhere. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, your host and publisher of Mac's List. I'm joined by my co-host, Ben Forstag, our managing director, and Jenna Forstrom, our community manager. This week, we're talking about how you can make your LinkedIn profile stand out in an online search. When hiring managers look for job candidates, they turn to social media, especially LinkedIn. According to one national survey, 87% of recruiters say they use LinkedIn to find applicants. Our guest expert this week is Marc Miller. He says you can take simple steps to make your LinkedIn profile rise to the top of a list in an online search. Marc and I talk later in the show. Now, your LinkedIn profile isn't a resume. It has a much more informal tone. In fact, on many LinkedIn accounts, people use first-person language, I, we, or us, the kind of language not found on resumes. Ben Forstag shares an article with us later in the show that describes the advantages and disadvantages of this approach. And someday, you may get fired or laid off from your job. It's happened to me not once but twice. What do you say about your dismissal? That's our listener question of the week. It comes from Gregory Rouse in Portland, Oregon. Jenna Forstrom offers her advice shortly. First, as always, let's check in with the Mac's List team here in the Mac's List studio. We're talking about LinkedIn this week. It's a favorite topic of the team, right up there with 1 or 2 page resumes. We all have passionate views on that. And I'm curious, Jenna, maybe you want to kick off for us, and Ben as well. What's your number one tip to make your LinkedIn profile rank high when employers do online searches?
My number one tip is to always try to achieve that all-star level. So LinkedIn has a pretty good program where it kind of walks you through as you're setting up. So it'll say you're at 60%, so you're like a beginner, and you can move up, and then 100% is the all-star level. And that kind of ties into my second one, which is always give recommendations for coworkers and bosses and superiors and teammates before you request information. So kind of give them a reason to write a recommendation. But getting recommendations is part of hitting the 100% all-star level.
Tell us about the benefits of doing that. I mean, you know me, Jenna, because we work together. I love completing things. But by filling out your profile and getting that all-star ranking, and particularly adding profiles, how does that help you with online searches?
I think it just walks you through all the different ways you can maximize LinkedIn. So it tells you to join some groups. And it makes recommendations like we see you work at Nike or Standard Insurance, like connect with other employer, coworkers that way, or add your languages or add professional development things or photos. And I think just walking you through that, you learn more and more about LinkedIn and you get connected to people and you naturally find more opportunities. And then your news feed fills up with different opportunities as well. So just gets you out there, gets you connected, and that gives you that hacker insider trail to finding new jobs.
Yeah, it's a great advice because it's kind of like getting an online tutorial and getting shown all the LinkedIn secrets.
Correct, yeah.
Terrific. Well, Ben, what are your thoughts? You got a super hack you want to share?
Well, I've got a real simple one, which is you have to think like a search engine. And search engines are all built around keywords. And so when you're crafting your LinkedIn profile, especially that summary section, think through the important keywords that are relevant to the career you have or the career you want. I think sometimes people try to get too artsy with their summaries, and they're beautifully written and they're lovely to read, but they don't include the right keywords for LinkedIn's own search engine to really ping and find you when someone types in certain words. So if you're avoiding certain phrases that are common in your industry, you're really losing out.
Now, I know there are online tools you can use to find keywords for blog posts or that are particularly popular on social media accounts like Twitter or Instagram. Are there tools like that can help people figure out which of, say, one of 3 or 4 common words they might use for a skill that would be would have greater standing on LinkedIn?
Yeah, there are. And actually, I think I talked about one of them on one of our earlier podcasts. And right now, Mac, you're showing that our show is not scripted because I actually don't remember what the name of that tool was, but we will make sure to get that in the show notes.
Okay.
But essentially, it kind of showed you, like, if you're in marketing, right? There's 1,000 different terms you could use and said, these are the terms that are most common in job descriptions around marketing. And so that gave you some kind of baseline for how employers think and the kind of things they're looking for so that you can craft your own profile around those words. And when you have the right keywords, it's just easier for employers to find you when they type those words into LinkedIn.
Yeah, and it's striking to me when I do social media posts for Mac's List, when I say on Instagram, it'll pop up, you might type in career, and you'll see that careers gets tens of thousands of more uses than career, the plural versus the singular. And so you'll get in front of more people just by choosing a word that's spelled slightly differently. Yeah. So you can see the same thing happen on LinkedIn too. Well, my suggestion would be, it goes back to Jenna's advice, which is be complete, and above all, complete your network. Make a list of all the people you worked with at your different jobs or that you got to know at university or even in high school, and make sure you send them LinkedIn invitations. And that will push you up higher the more first-degree connections you have in LinkedIn searches. And it also taps into a very powerful principle, which is people hire people they know or are known and to people they trust. And so the bigger you can make your network, and it has to be an authentic network, the more success you're likely to have in those LinkedIn searches. Well, thank you both. Let's turn to you, Ben. And every week you're out there searching the internet, poking around those nooks and crannies, looking for websites, books, and tools our listeners can use in their job search or managing their career. What have you uncovered for us this week?
So within the space of career management, there are certain questions that generate a lot of discord amongst the experts. You mentioned one of them, the length of resume. Some people are insistent that it must be 1. Other people are in the 2-page camp. Another one of those topics is whether your LinkedIn profile should be in the first person or the third person. Now, a little grammar lesson.
I know you have strong views on this one too.
I do, yes.
Just like Jenna and I have about resume links.
That's right. So a quick grammar lesson here. So when we're talking about the first person, we're talking about when you speak about yourself using the terms I, me, and my. When we're talking about the third person, that's when you're talking about yourself as if you're talking about some other person. So you use terms like he, him, his, or she, her, hers, or they, their, and them. So the question here is, when you're writing that summary statement and that filling out your profile in general, do you talk about yourself using the word I, or do you talk about yourself using the word he, she, they, and so forth? So the resource this week is an article all about this topic. It's called LinkedIn Profile, First Person or Third Person. It was actually posted on LinkedIn, and it's by Judy Schramm, who's a social media consultant for business executives. She lays out the pros and cons for both approaches. So her support for the third person argument is that, this is how resumes are generally structured. You almost never see a resume written in the first person. Also, it avoids using the word I, which can sometimes sound egotistical. If every sentence starts with I did this, I did that, some people think that's a bit narcissistic. On the other hand, she also says there's arguments for using the first person, which is that it's more personable and relatable, and it's better for networking. So let me ask you guys, what's your thought on this?
I'm now reconsidering my LinkedIn profile because I'm pretty sure it's in the third person, but I feel like maybe it should be in the first person. Mac?
Well, mine is in the first person, and this was a journey for me because I have worked as a writer and communicator in my career, and I was used to the formality of the resume. And, you're also talking to a guy who finally stopped wearing starched shirts about a year ago. So, but I think in the end, what matters, and I imagine what the question that's on our listener's mind, Ben, is this: which is going to be more effective in my search? Which is going to help me get an interview or get in front of employers?
So I don't think there's actually any data on which one is empirically the best. And actually, Judy Schramm's suggestion here is, in the absence of real strong data either way, you just pick one approach and stick with it. So if you're going to start in the third person, stay in the third person the entire time. If you're going to start in the first person, stay in the first person. Personally, I think that the first person is much more approachable. And there was one comment on this article that I thought was really good. And so I'm just going to read it here. This pretty much sums up what I think about the topic. This person said, quote, "In my opinion, using the third person narrative on LinkedIn is completely out of the question. You don't use the third person on any other social network or at networking events, so why would you do it on LinkedIn?" And the point here is that LinkedIn is about networking and about making connections. And it's not your resume. It's not the formal bio that's going to show up on a website. So you want to have the most approachable profile that you can. And a little bit of personality is okay there, because I think that's important for making that initial connection with lots of other folks on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's great advice. And for me, it was the point you made about approachability that caused me to switch from the more formal approach to being more approachable by using the first person.
And frankly, formal professional bios can be pretty boring most of the time. So if you can find a way to jazz it up with some personality and using the first person, I say go for it. So this resource, again, it was an article posted on LinkedIn. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. And if you have a strong feeling about first person versus third person on LinkedIn, let us know. I'd be curious to hear what you think.
2017 debate of Mac's List. 2016 was 2-page versus 1-page resumes. 2017 is first person versus third person.
Yeah, good. Well, there'll be lots of good advice about that. And I do hope we hear from listeners because it's always useful. Now, if you have a suggestion for Ben, please write him, and you can reach him easily at his address. It is ben@maxlist.org. And we would love to hear from you, and we'd love to share one of your ideas on the show. Now let's turn to you, our listeners, and also to Jenna Forster, our community manager, who's here to answer one of your questions. Jenna, what's in the Max List mailbag this week?
Today's question comes from Gregory Rouse, who asks,
"Hi, Ben, Jenna, and Mac. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for all of the work that you do with the podcast. It has been a fantastic resource. The podcasts are lively and upbeat and motivating, and you have intelligent and respectable guests on the show who just bring a wealth of knowledge and really sound advice to the podcast. So it's really enjoyable. My name is Gregory Rouse. I was calling in to record a question that hopefully you can answer on the air, and that is this. So recently I was unfortunately fired from my previous position, but it's also a blessing because I was fairly unhappy with that job. However, discussing being fired is often a difficult and tricky situation to navigate with potential employers. So I was hoping you could provide some guidance on maybe best practices for discussing this both in casual networking style meetings, but also in the formal interview setting, as those can be two very different styles of conversation. Thank you very much for any guidance you can provide. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Gregory, for calling in and asking your question and, kind of sharing a more vulnerable question. I think regardless of if it's an informational interview or an informal setting or a professional setting being interviewed, my advice is going to be the same either way. So first of all, process being fired. And if you haven't done that yet, we have a really great podcast with Marsha Warner about how to cope with job loss and just taking the time to breathe, mourn, get angry, get upset, move past that and look at the silver lining, which you've already admitted that it's kind of a blessing that you've gotten out of a bad work environment. So that's good that you started that journey. And then she goes on to give advice about owning the story. So I was doing job X, why happened. So that could be getting laid off. That could be the economy changing. That could be the company relocating headquarters and you having kids in school and you didn't want to move to another location. It could be whatever. And so you lost a job. And then just being really, really honest, but also providing hope because of this incident. I've learned blah, blah, blah. And I have a personal example. I was laid off after working at an agency for 6 months. And I just came in and had a meeting with my boss, and HR was there, and they were like, today's your last day. This isn't working out very well. And it kind of in the similar shoes, I was pretty miserable and I hadn't really realized it. I knew something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. But I just spent a lot of time thinking about it, reaching out to friends, talking about the situation, got a lot of feedback from friends that I trusted in the same industry as me, and just was able to work through that and got employment a couple months after that whole little situation. So it's almost like a blip on my radar, my resume now. Like, oh yeah, I spent 6 months there and no big deal. Like, move on. Mac and Ben, do you guys have any more advice?
So I think you need to be honest about the situation. But the details, I think when you're talking to people in a networking setting or an informational interview, I think it's enough to say, I was in a situation that wasn't working out for me, and just kind of leave it at that, because the threshold of how detailed you need to get about your work history is not that high in that kind of setting. When we're talking about an interview, clearly you need to be upfront with the employer and tell them the details of why you're no longer at that job. My suggestion would be to get in front of the story. So instead of having the employer come and say, so why aren't you at this job anymore? Or why were you only there for 6 months? Have a good, truthful story that you tell ahead of time to frame that experience. And I think you can include things like, it wasn't a happy experience for me. It wasn't a good fit. And in the end, it was them firing me that helped me realize that. But put that out there ahead of time so that the employer, A, they're not asking the questions, or more importantly, B, that they're not asking questions and just creating a narrative in their own mind about why you weren't there.
Well, ideally, I think in a perfect world, you want to have a conversation with the employer about the reasons for your departure. And managers are often open to descriptions like, well, they want, often there are no hard feelings, it's just not a good fit. And there's an opportunity, particularly if you initiate the conversation, to say, well, let's come to a parting of the ways. Now, how should we talk about this? And one way that it's done in a politic way that is true but doesn't make it a firing is say, well, there were budget cuts, or there was a change in leadership. The agency went in a different direction, and I decided I wanted to do something else instead. And there are two benefits you get from having that conversation with your supervisor before you walk out of the office. One is it brings some closure about what happened and why, and in a way that I think gives you reinforces your dignity, but it also sets you up for the possibility of a reference check down the line. And there may be a call, and the possibility of that call happening diminishes, obviously, as the years go by. Many employers don't go back more than 2 or 3 jobs, but you won't lose any sleep about what your manager might say when she or he gets that call. The final thing I would say, and I think Jenna and Ben, you're both offering excellent advice here, is just as much as possible, talk about the future, not the past. So when you see people at networking events, you say, well, and they ask what you do, you can say something like, well, I'm in transition, or I'm looking for new opportunities in blank. And I recently left this organization, and now I'm focusing on this. And most people just want to hear where you work, or if you're not working somewhere, what you want to do instead. And as getting out in front of that will serve you well.
Yeah, one thing I found is that a lot of people overestimate the negative impact of a firing at some point in their career. I mean, everyone or most people have had at least one work experience in which they were let go. And oftentimes that's a culture fit issue or a budget issue or something like that. The one exception here where I think you'd have to be really worried would be if you did some nefarious thing, if you were stealing from the organization. But short of that, I mean, I think it's probably okay to have being fired at one point in your career.
Yeah, again, it's happened to me twice. I've been through layoffs, and it's not fun. So I appreciate you sharing the question, Gregory. And I also just want to reinforce your advice, Jenna, about paying attention to the emotional parts of it. Sometimes people in a hurry to get on to the next thing. Well, great. Well, thank you, Gregory, for sharing that question. And thank you, too, for the kind words about the podcast. We're glad it's helpful to you. If you have a question for Jenna, please email her. Her address is jenna@maxlist.org. But even better, call our listener line. That number is area code 716-562-8255. That's 716-JOB-TALK. If we use your question on the show, we'll send you a free copy of Land Your Dream Job Anywhere, our new book, or a Max List coffee mug. It's your choice. So one of those is on its way to Gregory even as we speak. Most people struggle with job hunting. The reason is simple. Most of us learn the nuts and bolts of looking for work by trial and error. That's why I produce this podcast, to help you master the skills you need to find a great job. It's also why I wrote my new book, Land Your Dream Job Anywhere. For 15 years at Max List, I've helped people in Portland, Oregon find meaningful, well-paying, and rewarding jobs that they love. Now I put all of my job hunting secrets in one book that can help you no matter where you live. You'll learn how to get clear about your career goals, find hidden jobs that never get posted, and ace your next job interview. For more information and to download the first chapter for free, visit maxlist.org/anywhere. Now let's turn to this week's guest expert, Marc Miller. Marc Miller has worked at IBM, taught high school math, and had a near-fatal bicycle accident that changed his perspective forever. Marc credits his varied career with teaching him a vital lesson. Most people don't know what makes them happy. Marc now helps others, especially baby boomers, find careers that they can grow into for the decades that lie ahead. He joins us today from Austin, Texas. Marc, thanks for being on the show.
It's great to be here, Mac.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, our topic this week, as you know, Marc, is LinkedIn. And our listeners, most of them, of course, have LinkedIn profiles. And one of the challenges they tell us that they struggle with is how can they make their LinkedIn profile stand out in an online search? Can you tell us a little bit, Marc, how employers use LinkedIn when they're looking for candidates for jobs?
Sure. One of the things that has changed over the last 20 years is they are now out looking online, primarily LinkedIn, to find talent. And it used to be, you wait for things to get posted online, you apply, then they look through who applied. But now they're actually looking for talent, and they don't care whether you're looking for a job. And so they're using certain keyword strategies to essentially search the web, primarily LinkedIn, to find you.
So I can hear some of our listeners saying, or right now, well, gosh, I've been on LinkedIn for a number of years, and I've never been contacted by an employer. Why is that so, Marc? Is there a reason why they're perhaps not popping up in an online search?
Well, there are a couple different things. Number one, they aren't connected to the right people, so they're not close enough network-wise to the people who are hiring. And two, you're not using the right job titles and keywords in your profile to be found. This is all about making yourself attractive. And the key piece is not using the words you use aren't important. It's the words they use. So this is everything from, I'll use an example. I had a client here recently. He worked for a major semiconductor firm. He was interviewing with another company, another major semiconductor firm, and they used the same terminology for different things, or they're using different terminologies for the same thing. And they went right past each other.
So how does a candidate find out the words that an employer is going to use to search for jobs that they want to be, they'd like to fill?
Sure. So the first thing, if you're just looking at keywords, go use one of the major word cloud tools like TagCrowd or Wordle. And one of the easy ways is take a job description, plug it into the word cloud, and what it'll do is it'll pop up with the most common phrases, or more importantly, the most common words. Then what you can do is then go back into the job description and see how those words are being used. I've got a video on my site. If you search on keywords, you'll find the post where I search on it's a training manager's job. And the most common word that popped up was management. When you go back into the actual job description, what pops up is product management or project management and learning management system. I now have two keyword phrases that someone who is hiring for that job would be looking for.
So we can include links to these tools that you mentioned in the show notes, Mark, and let's say you go through that process, you test these keywords using those tools that you found in a job posting for a position that interests you. What's the next step? How do you incorporate those keywords into your LinkedIn profile?
Okay. The key thing here is in each section of your LinkedIn profile, you should have a keyword section. And like at the end of the summary, it should say keywords, keyword, vertical bar, keyword, vertical bar. Now, only use the keywords that are applicable. In other words, don't lie. And this is particularly true of those of us who've been in the job market for many years, like me. I've been working for 40 years. The idea here is plug them every place it belongs. The other places you should put them in your headline. So the headline is 120 characters. Use all of it. And you should either put keywords in there or branding statements in there, things that people would be searching for. So things like looking for a new opportunity in your headline doesn't really do you a whole lot of good. No one's searching on that keyword, on that phrase. So you want to place them as many places as you can. Again, don't lie and don't repeat.
So how many keywords would you recommend placing at the end of a section? And I think 3 to 5?
10, 15. It largely depends on what you've done. And so I'll use the example. I work with a lot of product managers. And unfortunately, product management is a largely keyword nebulous profession. In other words, if you're looking for a product manager, the only words you're going to find are product and manager. But there are other professions that are much more keyword rich. I was working with a gentleman here recently who wanted to get into pharmacogenomics, the modeling of drugs. There were a half a dozen terms that we went looking on, and then we tried to figure out whether it was legit to weave those into his own profile. And we found of the dozen or more, 2 or 3 were valid. So we used those.
And what kind of results did you see, Mark?
Oh, he's getting lots of opportunities. The challenge is he lives in the Midwest and all the jobs are in Boston and San Francisco. So he could have a job today if he's willing to move to Boston.
Now, so we've covered keywords. You mentioned earlier job titles. Tell us why titles matter and how to use them strategically so that you do rise to the top in an online search.
Sure. When when people are searching for talent, they're searching on primarily two things: your current job title and keywords. Now, notice I said current job title. If you do not have a job right now, go make a job. I always encourage everyone at some point in time in their career to actually have a business. It may be just a shell. Maybe you get on LegalZoom and form an LLC. Maybe it's called, just like Mac Pritchard LLC or Marc Miller LLC. And in the job title, you want to put in all the job titles that you are interested in. So I'll use the example. I've worked with a lot of product managers, and product managers often also do product marketing. So therefore, in the job title of my current job, I put product manager, then I put a vertical bar and product marketing. Again, don't lie, but the idea here is you want to start figuring out the terminology that they are using. Now you're going to want to play around with these and see what makes you found.
So what I'm hearing is that when you create a job title for basically a consulting practice, you may give it a formal name, you have an opportunity to use not just one, but several titles or several job titles in the title space on LinkedIn, and that increases the likelihood you'll pop up in these online searches.
Correct. You are in the job title field, I believe, is 180 characters long. And so use it.
Okay.
Use it to your benefit. But again, be honest. And I'll use the other example. If you are a business analyst but you also are a project manager, so you put business analyst, vertical bar, project manager.
So those are two great hacks, keywords, both at the end of sections and through scattered, again, honestly, through descriptions of positions you've had. And the second one you mentioned was job titles. Let's move on to a third point. I know that comes up a lot for people who are in transition, and you touched on this, Mark. People, when they either in their summary statement or their headline or perhaps in the title for their most recent position might say, currently looking for opportunities in blank. Tell us why you don't recommend to the people you work with that they do that and what they should do instead.
Because it doesn't help them. No one's searching on that. Now, I might write that out in my summary, but in the very top of the headline is the most searched item. The two things you should focus on to make sure I'm being found, firstly is your headline, and the second is your picture. But the headline, when people are searching, it is the first thing that is searched. So it should be very, very descriptive of you.
Great. This is excellent advice. And I think 3 great hacks that people can use to again, rise to the top in those LinkedIn search rankings. Now, Mark, tell us what's next for you. What do you have coming up?
Well, I have my next edition of my Repurpose Your Career a book. It's coming out April 15th. And of course, supporting that is now my Repurpose Your Career podcast, which comes out every Monday. So we are busy here at Career Pivot.
Well, great. We'll be sure to include links in the show notes to your site, and this episode should air in March, so people can begin to plan and anticipate. Looking forward to your book. So
yeah, we are planning to have it available for pre-order on March 15th on Amazon. So this should be good timing.
Great. Well, again, we'll include links to that information about your book as well as your website, which is careerpivot.com. Mark, thanks for coming on the show today.
You're very welcome.
Take care. All right, we're back in the MaxList studio with Jenna and Ben. And what are some key points that you two heard Marc make in our conversation about how to stand out on LinkedIn searches online?
So I think the big point that I took from it was the importance of job titles and making sure that you're weaving in those keywords into job titles. And I think sometimes that means that you're not putting the formal official title that you had there, but you're putting a title that is still truthful, still representative of what you actually did, but incorporates some more appropriate keywords into it.
Yeah, I think keywords can make a huge difference in your LinkedIn profile and in the work that you do online in general. So, Jenna?
I thought he had an interesting point about if you're unemployed, starting your own business. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with his idea of like going out and becoming like an LLC or, spending, because I think the state of Oregon, it's $100. And when you're unemployed, that's $100. But I do think he has something to say there about the act of being active. So not being passive in your, unemployment, wallowing, watching Netflix, like that kind of thing. So maybe building up a personal website with your portfolio and having that on your LinkedIn with work examples, if that's something that you're doing, like if you're a designer or developer or project manager, talk about those kind of projects. Or I think volunteering and getting on a board and those types of things. I was just thinking that was a good point to have, like to always be doing something. I just don't know if I agree with like creating an LLC. As someone who's done it for a side project, it's a lot of work. So
yeah, I agree. I think if you do set up a LLC, in short, you're creating a kind of consulting practice, and you probably certainly I think we've all done this, the three of us. I have taken part-time gigs during transitional periods of unemployment, or done what you just suggested, Jenna, which is to volunteer and to use that volunteer position basically as describing it on LinkedIn and using it as sort of a resume gap filler. But I think both are similar approaches, but probably easier than going out and filing some paperwork with the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I just liked Marc's emphasis on the strategy behind choosing the words. Again, think about the job you want. Look at those job postings, identify what you think are the most important words, and then test that assumption by using these online tools that he mentioned that will show you how popular words rank on LinkedIn. And, I think it's also important to remember that a LinkedIn profile can't substitute for informational interviews or networking or getting out and talking to people and applying for jobs, but it can be a valuable way to get in front of employers and recruiters, and you're going to do the profile anyway, so why not do it smart? Why not do it strategically? Well, thank you both, and thank you, Marc, for joining us on the show, and thank you, our listeners, for joining us for today's episode of Find Your Dream Job. If you like what you hear, please sign up for our free weekly newsletter. In every issue, we give you the key points of that week's show. We also include links to all the resources mentioned, and you get a transcript of the full episode. If you subscribe to the newsletter now, we'll send you our job seeker checklist. In one easy-to-use file, we show you all the steps you need to take to find a great job. Get your free newsletter and checklist today. Go to maxlist.org/podcast. Join us next Wednesday when our special guest will be Jeff Altman. We'll talk about the single best question you can ask in any job interview. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.